Hello, ladies. This is Ola Davis with episode number 84 of the When Marriage Hurts podcast. Thank you for joining me on this one. Welcome to the first episode in the month of August. I hope you're enjoying your summer. So, in this episode right here, I want to talk about generational patterns or what Christians call generational curses. If your grandma was married to an abusive man and your mom is married an abusive man and now you thought you married the love of your life, but now they're maltreating you and you're like, oh, this just reminds me of my mom's marriage or my grandma's marriage. That's generational patterns. That's what we're going to be talking about. And I will be back after this. Stay tuned. Hey sis, welcome to the When Marriage Hurts podcast. I'm your host, Ola Davis. My mission is to help Christian women in painful marriages become aware of the marriage lies our society and religion has programmed our heads with. Are you tired of marriage advice that always blames you for whatever goes wrong in your marriage? Have you attended all the marriage seminars seeking help only to be blamed and shamed for your marriage problems? Has your marriage become the source of your greatest pain? Have you lost hope of being happily married? Are you just hanging in for the sake of your kids? I've been there before. I know what it is like to feel alone in marriage, yet feel trapped by the wedding vows that I made. Together, we will discover scriptural truths that set us free from the pain so that healing can begin. Oh yeah, let's shake some tables. Welcome back. Welcome back. I hope you've been having a great summer or at least a good summer. Um, yes, so talking about generational patterns slash curses, you know what? I'm just gonna stick with generational patterns. I don't like the word curses because it creates this idea in one's mind that there was a witch somewhere that, made a potion and proclaimed a curse on your entire family line. So I would rather, just stick with the word patterns, generational patterns. Um, Now, generational patterns wasn't something that I was kind of aware of it. I mean, it's hard to grow up in church and not, especially Pentecostal or evangelical circles, and not to have heard of this being talked about in church. But I started paying attention to it in my own life when I started recognizing the fact that I was indeed being emotionally abused. It came to a point in 2021 that I just started noticing that I was kind of living my mom's life. Now, mind you, um, my mom, she was married to my dad until the day she died. She was physically abused by him for years, and then after a while, the physical abuse stopped. And in my young mind, then, I thought, oh, my dad is becoming a better man because he would read the Bible for hours and hours and hours. Um, And then when I grew a bit older as a teenager, I understood that something still wasn't right, but I didn't know what. And it was only in the last 3 or 4 years or so that I got to understand emotional abuse. And now, in hindsight, when I look back at my mom's marriage to my dad, even though the physical abuse stopped, the emotional and psychological abuse never really stopped. So essentially, he had switched his tactics from physical abuse to, hidden forms of abuse. So it was somewhere in 2020, 2021 that I noticed that, it was like I just had a light bulb moment, like, oh my goodness, I have become my mother because I was in my 30s, my health was failing. I was working a full-time job. I was also working a business on the side. I was exhausted and tired all the time. The medications that doctors were putting me on would work for a little while and stop working. I just felt, when you feel so sick, even though I didn't have like a terminal illness or anything like that, but I felt so sick that I started to think I might not make it to my mid 40s. And I couldn't even see how I would make it to my 50s. Like, I couldn't look far ahead. It just seemed like I would not make it. And then it suddenly occurred to me, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm living my mom's life. My mom was a hardworking woman too. My mom, I mean, she wasn't working two jobs or anything. She worked a job as a teacher for a while and then she quit that to go into business. My mom was a successful international business woman. She was importing goods to sell to wholesale people. She wasn't even selling directly to customers, she was selling to retailers. She was that successful and she was the breadwinner, which, I never knew about until after a death. But I realized how I was repeating a pattern similar to that, and knowing how that impacted my mom's health and how she had, by the age of 60, how old was she? 62, 63. She had already had two strokes and, dropped dead in her early 60s. And I started looking at my life and I'm like, oh my goodness, if nothing changes, if I keep going on like this, if this marriage keeps going this way, I don't even know if I'm going to make it to 50, you know? And if I ever got a stroke, like had a stroke, this guy is not even going to stick around or take care of me. He's going to just push me to the cops. So it was a huge awakening for me. Um, and I'm not saying that every woman who's been abused in a marriage had a mom that was abused or a grandma that was abused. But I'm just saying that generational patterns is something to pay attention to. You might not have had women in your family being abused, but perhaps your husband who's maltreating you had a father or at least a parent, maybe a dad or a mom, that maltreated the other spouse, and it kind of went, on like that in their family tree. It's a real thing. Now, I sometimes get the question from people where they say, "Oh, is it spiritual? Is it?" And I try not to get caught up in that. Sometimes some church leaders or pastors will let you know that, oh, it is it is a curse, it is spiritual, it is you have demons that are doing such and such in the family. The reason I don't get caught up with that is because when women get sucked into that, and I almost did. They try to suck me into it. When you get sucked into that, you start taking on that responsibility. And what do I mean by that? Okay. So if they say, oh, your husband is abusing you, your father-in-law abused your mother-in-law too, and your husband's grandfather abused his wife too, and this thing is a spiritual problem. I'm not contesting that. I'm just saying it is not your responsibility to fix that. They try to get me sucked into that by telling me that my ex-husband had a spiritual, their family had some whatever idols, demons, whatever you want to call it, that is causing that pattern to be like transferred down the family line. And I'm like, okay, you guys go sort that out, but that is not my burden to carry. They will try to manipulate you and say, oh, but you are his wife now, and you're there to be his helper, and you are now one, you married into the family. I married a man that was supposed to be my partner. I didn't marry into and I didn't marry into abuse or marry into bondage. And the reason it's important not to get sucked into this is because it takes the spotlight off of the abuse that you are suffering and it makes your abuser the victim. It makes your abuser the victim because now they're going to say, oh, it's the one who needs help, it's the one who has this problem, it's the one who needs to be helped. And I'm not saying they don't need help, I'm just saying it's not your responsibility to help them with that. Your own responsibility is to heal from the abuse you have experienced. That's your own responsibility. So you are going to go out and go get the help you need by talking to a therapist, by seeing a doctor. The abuse has caused you to have some ailments in your body. Um, so that is your responsibility. But to help this guy fix his own generational patterns in his family is his own responsibility, and he should seek the help that he needs to be a better person. Now, what if the generational pattern is on your end, right? And what I mean by on your end is, maybe your grandma married an abusive man, your mom married an abusive man, and now you find yourself in an abusive marriage despite all of your intention to not repeat that pattern. It just seemed like somehow it happened to you. Now, that is your responsibility to try and fix that. It is your responsibility to dig deep, and you don't have to do this alone, by the way. In fact, I don't recommend that you do it alone. You could, but I just feel like maybe it takes longer if you're working through it by yourself. But it's your responsibility to dig deep, to seek professional help, to try and understand how you came to repeat this pattern. Did it have something to do about how you were raised, your upbringing? You were raised in that abusive household, um, or maybe you weren't raised in an abusive household, but you were raised in an abusive, religious setting where you were made to feel that you were supposed to sacrifice your own comfort and happiness in order to make other people feel comfortable or happy. People pleasing patterns. Really dig deep and try to find the root of how you got to be in that situation. So that would be your responsibility to work on. Your husband's own stuff with his own family and patterns will be his own stuff to work on. You don't do his own work for him, he doesn't do yours for you. Anybody that tries to place your husband's quote unquote homework on you is abusing you by proxy. Because for those of you that have been listening to this podcast or have listened to several episodes, you would have heard me say this quote at some point. That is by Bob Hamp, and the quote is, abuse is the misplacement of responsibility. Abuse is not when someone hits you, it is when someone places a responsibility that isn't yours on your shoulders. That's what abuse is. So if they are giving your husband's homework to you to do, they are abusing you indirectly. So whether these generational patterns are spiritual or just cultural or whatever the case is, know what part is yours to deal with and what part is your husband's to deal with. And if he isn't willing to deal with it, or if he's putting the blame on you, or if he's saying, well, she won't help me, she won't come to the special prayer meeting with me. Ladies, they almost dragged me into a prayer meeting, and they were like, oh, they were gonna have this deliverance prayer session for my ex-husband. But the catch is I had to be there. If I wasn't there, somehow Jesus wasn't gonna answer the prayer, which is ridiculous, guys. It's just manipulation. Do not You do not allow yourself to get sucked into that. Don't. Like, what kind of a God would not answer a prayer just because you are not there? That's just a bunch of garbage, ladies. So don't get sucked into it. Know what is your husband's own work. Know what is yours. Work on what's yours to work on. Let him work on what is his to work on. I hope that helps someone. Ladies, I really want to hear from you. If you please, if you've never left a review on Apple Podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcast. It gives the podcast more visibility, so that other women that need this kind of content can find it easily. Also, I would like to hear from you, especially about topics that you would like me to discuss on the podcast. You can send me a DM on social media. You can, if you're already a part of the Facebook private group, you can put it on there. You can post there anonymously. You can DM me on Instagram at When Marriage Hurts. The Facebook private group is also at When Marriage Hurts. I would love to hear from you. And for those of you who do not know yet, or for those who heard it in the last episode, here is a reminder that I now offer coaching sessions. Those of you that had emailed me in the past to say, oh, do you offer coaching? And I'm like, no, I don't. Well, now I do. And I do have limited spots open this summer. So you can check for the link in the show notes to book a session. It could be about anything. It could be just to get clarity about whatever is a pain point or source of confusion for you right now in your relationships. You can book a coaching session with me, and then we will talk through it and find you that clarity that you really need. Okay, so this is the much that I can take on this episode. Thank you so much for joining me, and until the next time that we get to meet again, I hope you have a wonderful week ahead, and I want you to know that you do not deserve to be abused. You were made for love. You deserve to be loved and cared for. Have a great week. Has this podcast blessed you? If yes, please head over to Apple Podcasts, When Marriage Hurts, and leave a written review for the show. It would be such a blessing to me to know that this show has impacted you in some ways. Also, share this podcast with a friend. Let's spread the word. Lastly, if you would like to be a part of a community of like-minded women of faith who are on a journey to living the best life God has for them despite their marriage challenges, join our Facebook group, When Marriage Hurts. Until next time, remember these words of Jesus. Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest.